I didn't ask for a meeting to see what you guys were gonna do and then go from there.
Oh,
Only the talking.
I didn't know you didn't know, or I would have mentioned it to you earlier. All right, so
Oh, there it
I think this is going to be it.
is. The gabbers.
We have we've had some good catching up time.
Well, I haven't seen you in...
I know it's from the snow apocalypse that happened all over the world. And
From east to west.
yes, I tell you, the sledding at our house was amazing with the
Was it
ice.
so fun?
It was incredible.
It was a ride.
We tried to go sledding and we couldn't.
We probably couldn't have gotten up the hill.
No, our hill was pretty bad.
I don't think we could have gotten.
My dad had a friend come help on something on the house, and he got stuck.
Oh, jeez.
All right, so we're going to try to get through as much of the Solzhenitsyn that we can, and he does not allow you to go very quickly. So we will start with chapter 2. If someone wants to read, or I can start off.
Unfortunately, the first word is kind of difficult to pronounce.
Go for it, Joe. You just do it.
Try to do it as badly as possible.
Say it with a
worst-
Russian accent.
We're on chapter 2, right?
Yes.
Dostoyevsky.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Dostoyevsky
There you go.
once let drop the enigmatic phrase, "Beauty will save the world." What does this mean? For a long time, it is used to seem to me that this was a mere phrase. Just how could such a thing be possible? When had it ever happened in the bloodthirsty course of history that beauty had saved anyone from anything? Beauty had provided embellishment, certainly, given uplift, but whom had it ever saved?
It's different, Mike.
Keep going.
Yes.
However, there is a special quality in the essence of beauty, a special quality in the status of art. The conviction carried by a genuine work of art is absolutely indisputable and tames even the strongly opposed heart.
Okay.
There's all kinds of different interpretations. Translations. Mine is different.
Yeah, mine's a little bit different too. I like what mine just said this. The last couple sentences she read from my translation says, "There is, however, a particular feature in the very essence of beauty, a characteristic trait of art itself. The persuasiveness of a true work of art is completely irrefutable. It prevails even over a resisting art."
Mine reads different than that.
Well, these are this
The beauty of
is
translation.
it's coming from Russian, so
This is by Thomas Whitney. I mean, who's he?
yeah. Well, his it's been really good so far.
It has
I've
been
really
very
enjoyed
poetic.
it. But beauty will save the world. Is it a phrase? Does it have meaning? I was thinking today. So this kind of happened. Laura had a C.S. Lewis quote that she was having us look over, and when Nina and I read the quote, we were like, it doesn't have the same punch Lewis would have.
It didn't sound like him.
It didn't sound
It
like
was reminiscent, but
it had some, like, there were some things you're like, I can see Lewis using that syntax or that type of grammar or something like that, but it lacked punch. So I got thinking, why is it exactly that certain literature, certain authors can use the exact same words, but it lacks punch? And my conclusion is, guys like Jordan Peterson, guys like C.S. Lewis, guys like Tolkien, and they spent decades constructing that sentence. So when they say that sentence, there is so much more behind it than if some young whippersnapper or somebody who's never thought about anything says the words. Like, they're hollow. When Lewis says something, or when Solzhenitsyn says something, it's heavy. It's like you like, oh, I don't even know if I can carry this. It's so heavy because the way it was constructed, the way it came about was completely different. And I think that essence comes through when a person reads those words. But I'll open the floor for comments. Beauty has provided embellishment, certainly, given uplifts, but who has it ever saved? So do we agree with beauty has saved the world? Right now, he's going to go on and explain this, but what do we think? Can beauty save the world?
I guess it's how you define beauty.
does say, when had it ever happened in the bloodthirsty course of history that beauty had saved anyone from anything? I think of Esther in the Bible, and she was saved because of her beauty. She
She's
was
good.
taken to the kings.
She always comes up with like, oh yeah, that's good.
That was
She's not too dumb.
the king bent the scepter down and said, because of your beauty. Yes, there you go.
I think you're dealing with, broad word, but eschatologicalness here. That he's not necessarily saying in this any more than any of these like romantic and Victorian era writers are saying. I mean, they clearly recognize the immense amount of suffering. Dostoyevsky, along with our writer here, recognize the immense amount of suffering and what looks like gratuitousness, evil that's in the world. That I think they can only make that statement in looking at the very end and saying it just has to retroactively look back. It has to retroactively say,
So beauty is understood retroactively as opposed to being in the midst of it.
To somehow, think about, we just finished the last battle, right? And the way that wraps up all of this suffering and stuff like that, even to the point where, spoilers in here, but what happened to the kids on the train, and like that in their timeline, in their world, would never, whoever's watching that, whoever's reading the newspapers the day after that happened, and whatnot, they're not going to see the beauty. The beauty is only seen from Aslan's country, looking back.
Okay. Any rebuttals to that? Any pushback?
Well, I have this thought. When I was in graduate school, we talked about, my prof really liked artists that still made artwork while they're in concentration camps. And so he'd bring in books of like, here's an artist who was in a concentration camp, and all he could find to make work with was throwing out tea bags. And he would take throwing out tea bags, and there was this whole book of these little images of like abstractions done with like throwing out tea bags. I think of that, and then there was another person in aesthetics who, I can't remember their name, I can't remember the exact quote, but I remember reading about this, that he was trying to find beauty in the midst of the lions in the concentration camp. And then he came to this breakthrough where, like, at a certain point, he was able to push past, like, this sounds really dark, but, like, push past all the dead bodies and start to see beautiful design, even in the midst of the lines, and, like, trying to mine beauty out of, like, I wish I could remember exactly when I read that. And I remember when I read it, but, like, who the person exactly was. It was an artist. So he's, like, looking, and he's able to, like, I can translate this into, like, look for design, look for beauty in this. Sounds, I just remember those two things.
So, and also Nina brought up a good point about what is beauty. What beauty are we? What is the definition of beauty that we're trying to attain to here? But it's obviously something that's transcendent, that we can't. It's transpositional. The definition is transpositional here. We can grasp at it, but we're not going to land on what actually beauty is. But guess what? We know it when we see it.
That's what I was saying. We may not be able to define it, but when we see it, we know it.
Yes. Do you want to continue? Or are you done?
Reading.
Oh.
Do you have any more smart ideas?
Okay. One can construct a political speech, an assertive journalistic polemic, a program for organizing society, a philosophical system, so that in appearance it is smooth, well-structured, and yet it is built upon a mistake, a lie. And the hidden element, the distortion, will not immediately become visible. And a speech or a journalistic essay or a program in rebuttal or a different philosophical structure can be counterposed to the first, and it will seem just as well constructed and as smooth, and everything will seem to fit. and therefore one has faith in them, yet one has no faith.
Wow. Language can be construed, veiled, and misleading, as well as illuminating. One can create misdirection by using language as easily as one can create illumination by using language. The same tool that saves life can take life. The scalpel can just as easily perform a life-saving surgery as, we watch a lot of Bones, cut someone's carotid on purpose in the ill intent of ill motives. It's how one uses the instrument that determines what one will encounter. Will they encourage illumination, or will they cause regression? However, it is my contention that truth will out. No matter how language is to be construed. So, doublespeak, which George Orwell talks about, peace is war, love is hate, and you take the words and you change. If they entirely disrupt all the language that we use until we have no common tongue, like Babel, truth will still come to the forefront, and Solzhenitsyn is going to tell us in a minute how he thinks that's going to happen, and I think it's very good. This next sentence, though, is so heavy. When I think of it, it's so heavy for me. It is in vain to affirm that which the heart does not confirm. It is vain to affirm that which the heart does not confirm.
I'm going to read my translation. It's like I'm reading it's like NIV versus KJV. It's like, this is what it says. It is a waste of time shouting what doesn't ring true. I don't know. Look at the sentence before that. How did you say the one? You had one about faith and without faith. Read that one again.
And therefore one has faith in them, yet one has no faith.
And this one says, that is why they're so easily believed and disbelieved. Should I throw this version out, or is it?
Should I throw this version out?
I'm just wondering whether this is a junk version.
It's almost like you're reading the Message version.
That's what I don't want. I'm like, this is too easy.
Yeah, my translation says, in vain does one repeat what the heart does not find sweet. I like your translation.
I do. I like this. I think this translation for me. I like King James. I like Shakespeare. I like the Victorian stuff. I like the poetic, punchy stuff. It is in vain to affirm that which the heart does not confirm, because it's cognitive dissonance, in a sense, to say, yes, I believe this, but in you're sort of you're violating your own conscience.
But it doesn't something doesn't sit right. When I was reading through that section, it's like that's so much of what's going on as far as what goes for journalism these days, which grates against myself. I was a journalism major. I worked for a few years as a newspaper reporter back in the early mid '80s. Back when it was still you tried to be balanced and unbiased in your reporting and such.
What is this unbiasedness you speak about?
Yeah. And that's so much of what we have now. You've got the story here. And people are saying, well, what about this? Well, they add this more stuff, and it makes sense. It sounds good, but it doesn't ring true.
Mm-hmm.
And the heart knows when it doesn't ring true. And it's up to us to sharpen our wits and our knowledge and such to where we can more easily recognize when it's not ringing true in order to find the truth. But it is so easy for people to, like you were saying, manipulate it to where it sounds good, but then when you get to digging in it,
the lie is never. The lie is rarely. Let's say the lie is rarely grossly misattributed. It is only slightly. Now, what's awesome about that is if you can spot the slightness, you can turn it back and create. You can illuminate. Great thinkers do that. Your Lewises,
your Jesuses.
Jesus. So I'm excluding Jesus because he He's perfect. But the glory of God to conceal things is the glory of kings to seek them out. And so you have these people who would just say one thing, turn a phrase, right? And then suddenly illuminate tons of information. And Lewis is so good at just taking this thought and just twisting it. Just like a diamond, just you release it there, and now it releases all the illumination. Where the other people will take it back and obscure it. But it's only ever slight manipulations back and forth. There's a what is it?
I was good. No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, so going off what you said, there's an article in the New York Times, and if you follow me on Instagram, you've already seen me talk about it, that says critical thinking as we were taught is not good enough to doesn't work against disinformation of today. Basically what they're saying is the propagandists are too clever for you and you can't figure it out on your own. And I was like, wait, well, how would I know you're not too clever for me and you're not being the propagandist and telling me not to listen to the other guy? Suddenly, what do I believe? And like, well, I'm the New York Times, so you don't believe the other sources because you want to, because if it doesn't say what we say, then you can just dismiss it. They actually said go to Wikipedia. He actually said go to Wikipedia to get a baseline. And I was like, what is this? Is not. If I have Aristotle's 3 laws of logic, if I have logical fallacies in place, and I have a good understanding of correspondence theory, I don't need anything else. Give me any piece of information you want, and I'll be able to decipher the truth. But then I'm adverse to a lot of manipulation. I still can be manipulated, but I'm adverse to a lot of it. And suddenly I can pick it out and go, wait a second, this guy said this. That doesn't sound right. Let me look at it again. Oh, that's a logical fallacy. That's false. And you go through there, and it gets much easier to be in the media. But if you were never taught those skills, what do? You have to make a choice. That's why it says you have, therefore one has faith in them, yet one has no faith. Because I just believe whatever you tell me. Just whatever you say, I don't know. Just tell me what to believe.
So, would you say, or would you agree, that the work of words is incomplete and the work of art is complete? Is that like the...
Well, Solzhenitsyn is going to answer your question a little bit. I'm going to let him answer it probably better than I can. But I think you're on the right track in that art is trying to express the inexpressible, and we can know it, but not know what we know. We can see a painting and be moved and not know why we are moved. There's a truth being spoken to us. We don't know what it is, but it's deeper than words. It's deeper than it's the deep magic. Because Jadis, she manipulated the words. She manipulated the law to her advantage. But there was a deeper law under hers that she had no idea about. But even the Pevensies knew when they said Aslan's on the move. The name of Aslan moved them. Why would that? Why would this thing move you? Why would you be moved seeing a mountain? Right? When you see a mountain, why are we moved when we see these landscapes and these things? There's a deeper truth being spoken to us that we unconsciously know, but we haven't brought that into our consciousness yet. Words help us articulate that. Art helps us. It's like art helps us go, ooh, there's something I know that I should be able to articulate. And then language and literature is us pulling that out and getting it into articulation, so that we can see it. There it is. I've got it. Okay, I kind of got a handle on it. And that's what art brings it to our mind, and then language helps us bring it out here so we can get a handle on it.
So I was remembering that one of our first kind of roundtable discussions when we started this was about what makes a classic a classic. And I think that one of the ways that you distinguish a classic from contemporary literature is around this point, right? Not necessarily all contemporary literature, but why is it that Dostoyevsky, why is it that Victor Hugo, why is it that Homer and the Iliad, why is it that,
Beowulf,
Gilgamesh,
Yeah.
all of these things managed to stand the test of time, or even Plato, and those ancient words still so much resonate with us in a way that it's like, it almost baffles you sometimes, because you're like, the ways that we speak about people in the ancient world is almost like, well, we've moved past them so much, we've progressed so much, that we know so much more, and yet you can look back thousands of years and realize they actually know far more than you do about the way that the world truly is, and about life and thought. And that's where it's like, well, I can read a book that's written now, and it can be fine literature, but I don't know that it would fall in the category of art.
Yeah.
Like something like, I've been reading Les Mis, and I'm like,
right?
That's how to say it,
Yes,
or,
that's
or beauty will save the world.
That's how to say it. That's it. So, Peterson talks about I really encourage you guys to listen to his lectures on the Old Testament. Oh my gosh.
This podcast, it just goes like 100 miles an hour.
His Old Testament lectures, he starts out and says the literature of the Old Testament is not only some of the best literature ever written, it is the most necessary literature for human flourishing. And I was like, whoa. Because he's like, the archetypes that are in there, they've said it best. Like they've already said it best. And what we're doing now, in a sense, is we're just repeating those things. But he's right. The Dostoyevskys, the Frankls, even Beowulf and all these, the reason why we read them is because it's the best of us could create.
Yeah.
It's the best of us could put together. And when you read it, when you read Solzhenitsyn, and it's like, oh yes, that is what I've been trying to get at. What did it take for him to write that? It took for him suffering through a gulag to come to be able to pull that out of his unconscious and to get it out to a place where we can grapple with it. And that's a hard process. And most people today just want to say, "Oh, I'm going to pull this together, and here's my thought." And like, well, it's not a very good one. Like you haven't put any time into it. There's no blood, there's no sweat, there's no commitment, there's nothing in that. You haven't read people before you. You're trashing everybody before you. Think you've got everything. You have special revelation, I guess, because you're saying things that people disagree with for like 10,000 years. So why should I believe you? Oh, it's because it's my thought. Here, you're welcome. It's almost like 21st century writers like, here, you're welcome. I'm like, yeah, but it's got no soul. It's men without chest. There's no heart there. And then you read something like this, and you're just like, you can't hardly put it down. And you pick it up, and then it's so heavy, you have to put it down because it's almost too much. You're like, you don't know, can I? Beauty will save the world. Just think on that for a minute. On that concept of beauty can save the world.
Well, the word he uses here to describe, I don't know what everybody else's translation has, but he uses the word prophet or prophecy.
Yes.
That he is looking forward and seeing something that we can't see now. And the fact that that's been proven over the past several thousand years,
Yeah.
And whoever wrote Iliad and Odyssey would have no idea how much it means to us now, in our world, and how much that's contributed towards people's formation and thinking and stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons why it's like we need to hold on to these things.
I can't think
rather
of
than just move past them, and that's why it frustrates me.
Yes.
People are like, I don't really read, and I'm like,
I don't trust you.
Far into that culture.
It's like, if you don't read, I don't trust you. I don't trust your judgment. Is there a greater story of perseverance and commitment than Ulysses telling his men to tie him to the mast of the ship and point it home? I mean, that's powerful. And that's where, like, yeah, just tie me. I don't know, man. Just tie me to the mast. I've got to go aim me that direction, and then I'm just going to hang on. And it's like that is the human experience.
The interesting thing about that, I think that was when the sirens came. Remember
the sirens? Yes.
So he felt like beauty was important enough he wanted to experience that. he knew he couldn't resist the temptation, so he
Yeah.
said, "Tie me to the mast."
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
man.
I think about this. Here's another kind of like context for this, and it is kind of like over here. But I keep thinking about this because I've been really struggling with what does it mean for like seeing. You know, if you look in the news, you see all kinds of like. This is the time when it's like they're sifting. All kinds of people we thought were Christian leaders are like falling like flies. People are falling, and here and there, and people are being shaken. And I keep thinking about like what is like a true conversion, what is true discipleship. And I think that this kind of talks about this here. This is what I'm reading into this, is that, I'll just sum this up, is that if you can convince somebody with a very strong argument into something, then they can convince themselves out of it. Mm-hmm. If it's just an argument. But if it's something, but then I'm thinking about true conversion, being born again, like a piece of artwork and beauty. If it's really true, you know it's true, and argument can't move it out of it, because there's a truth that's like innate inside of the thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like where it doesn't matter what. I remember when I was like 21, and I was working at a restaurant in Lexington, and I was a senior at Asbury. And this guy, and you'd have people that came in, like ex-governors would come in, and this guy was like this really old, mean old lawyer. And his job, he came in there to try to talk me out of being a Christian. I just remember, I knew that I couldn't, I was 21 years old. I knew I couldn't, like, he started talking about the scriptures and trying to talk me out of, like, what was actually good and what wasn't. And what I remember thinking about that is that it doesn't, like, I've had a true, beautiful experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you say. You can't, like, people put it this way, a man with an argument can never beat a man with an experience. And, you may disagree with that, but like with a true experience. But I kind of think about it this way. If it's really a piece of artwork, a conversion is something that's actually a piece of artwork that God has put together. It's different than just like...
Well, I think you have to, for myself, I have emotions and feelings that come up. Mm-hmm. And arguments helps me go, ooh, that might not be the right thing. But it's a beautiful thing when my feeling I want to express lines up with truth that I know, and they become one. And there's this great thing of so just a carnal example is just I see how beautiful my wife is, and I can allow myself to think about that thought because it lines up with the covenant that I have, my emotions and my logic and everything. It lines up, and it's good. Where that does not happen with other people. And so, no, I think there's that symbiotic thing that happens there. So let's go with this. In contrast, a work of art bears within itself its own confirmation. Right? I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Concepts which are manufactured out of the whole cloth or overstrained will not stand up to being tested in images. It will somehow fall apart and turn out to be sickly and pallid and convincing to no one. Work steeped in truth and presenting it to us vividly alive will take hold of us, will attract themselves to us with great power, and no one ever, even in latter age, will presume to negate them. And perhaps the old trinity of truth, good, and beauty is not just the formal, outworn formula used to seem to us dying or during our heady materialistic youth. I mean, come on.
It's good that he clarifies here. He's actually, when he talks about art, I just assume he's talking about anything creative, but he's kind of like talking about visual images, like experiencing. He just clarifies there.
Yeah.
Is this true, though? As I was reading this, that first paragraph, right? Basically saying that works of art and truth, in their self-verification, will convince everyone that things that are false and ugly and placid and dull don't convince anyone. Well, I don't see that necessarily reflected well in human nature.
So I think what you have is you have to
seems very optimistic.
Allow for time. So what I would say is, will postmodern art be something we look at 100 years from now and go back and go, wow, look at this amazing painting of, wait, what is it again? Well, and so I think that what he's saying is you can't take a philosophy that is based in the lie and create good art out of it. It won't convey anything, and I think it'll fall apart. And so it may convince you in the interim, but long term, it's not going to sustain society.
Right, and this is why I've been like very eschatological in this. Is like we have to look at this from the end, and yet his wordage here talking about no one being convinced bothers me, because I think that could be number one. I think that could be utilized in a way to say, because it is convincing some people, even over a long period of time, right, or ages, that therefore that's confirmation of its truth, that therefore it's confirmation of its beauty.
So he's being idealistic?
I think he's being idealistic.
Oh, I definitely think he is being idealistic in this. I think he's saying at the end, no one will be convinced, because once it comes to fruition, once you see it come to fruition, because I think he answers that in the next page. I think he answers this a little better. So let's get there and see if we can get there. But we'll stop just for a second and mention this. He said, work steeped in truth, presenting it to us vividly alive, will take hold of us and attract us to themselves with great power. And no one ever, even in the latter age, will presume to negate them. Beowulf, King Arthur, all the great works, Epic of Gilgamesh, the Old Testament, like all these great books, we still go, they still have power, they still have weight, they still have beauty, they're still expressing these things. We still see the Sistine Chapels, we still see these great works of art, and we're still moved by it.
But is that not a minority that does versus the majority now? That's what bothers me about our contemporary age right now, which is so much like, this and everything like that, is that it's kind of like shut it down and look around and rather than be like, well, why would I want to go look at that?
But as soon as they see it, they know.
Do they?
I was going to say, do they though?
They would not. So you would not work so hard to destroy it if you didn't know it had real power.
I would feel a bit more on his page if he would say, it cannot at the end be denied, but we certainly suppress this stuff. Plenty of people suppress this stuff for their entire lives.
Well, I think because he came out of so he's out of the gulags. He's not. He is actually has freedom at this point.
Right.
And so he's looking at it going.
Maybe he's looking in retrospect, looking at which
the beauty did come through.
Which ones actually survived?
The lie is done. Like communism, it fell, and it fell because of beauty. These things have crumbled, and so maybe he's looking at it from that perspective. But for me, that gives me hope to go. Yeah, no matter how bad it is in this moment. He's right. That truth, in the end, Jesus says every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. And so if we think beauty is actually Christ, then in the end, beauty cannot be usurped or overcome in that. And so
beauty is definitely an apology. It's definitely throughout. I mean, the transfiguration, when he reveals himself, there's always beauty involved. Something I was just thinking about is that I've gotten into following a bunch of people, artists, in Moscow. Suddenly I know all these artists in Moscow. And when you look at their work, I was just thinking what is this Moscow art scene like? What is this common art scene? And it's all surrounded around really intense kind of impressionism, realism. A ton of artists. And I just think it's probably a reaction to this horrible communist bloc architecture and 80 years of ugliness in Moscow. Laura's been there before. I just noticed that there's so many artists they really are painting about beauty in Moscow and in that part of Russia right now. It's not like any kind of postmodern idea. It's just beauty. They're just looking for beauty. And I just wonder if it's just a response to all those years.
Oh, I think it is.
It's interesting because I'll just say this, is that as I look at their landscapes, look at their stuff, it's like recontextualizing my image of Russia. Because my image of Russia is like all the movies we saw growing up of like this cold, dark place where there's no life. But they're like taking these scenes, they're taking the landscapes and they're like making them like how we idealize America, like the American landscape. They're doing the same kind of thing, which is really interesting.
I mean, philosophy definitely comes out in architecture, in art. It has to come through. So what you believe comes through in your art. I look at all the concentration camps and all the buildings that were built by the Nazis, and they're the grotesque, obscene monstrosities. They're just these monstrosities that are sitting there that are offensive to the eye. They're not beautiful, and they're not meant to be. They're meant to evoke, look how powerful I am. It's not, and then you go to Oxford and you see all these buildings built in the 1200s, and they have all this beauty. You go, which one can sustain you? Which one actually draws you in? Well, it's Oxford. You go there, and it's magical. Like it is, you're like
beautiful.
And it's what Solzhenitsyn said. True art draws you to it, and so I'm like, that philosophy is coming out. So let's continue here. So perhaps the old Trinity.
It seems like in today's society we're getting just the opposite with today's woke culture or cancel culture. I mean, whatever offends somebody, then we need to remove it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like what you were just saying. They wouldn't be fighting so hard to destroy it if they didn't know that there was some truth there.
So if all things were equal, so here's what. Dictators remove all other options because they know in a fair fight, theirs is not the best. So the only way for their philosophy, their ideologies rise to the top is to ban all other ideologies, and therefore theirs naturally rises to the top because it's the only possibility. But in a fair fight, if you give somebody the option of going, well, here is a Nazi building, and here are the neo-Gothic buildings of Oxford, which one would you rather? No, we're going to take the Oxford. You're going to take the beauty. You're going to take the good, and you're going to reject the bad. But they don't give you that option. Their job is to continuously crush it and push it down. And he actually gets to this point, and we'll get to it in just a second.
Can I make one thought
Mm-hmm.
on that?
Yeah.
Because I do recognize that that's true. I mean, mentioning, for example, cancel culture and all that stuff, and trying to squash anything that's going to stand up and say don't, But I think that could be flipped the other way around as well, to say that any movement towards growth in a way, or towards progress, can also be seen as a suppression of truth and beauty as well. From a logical standpoint, that any fight can be seen as resistant to somebody else trying to be victorious. But the point of a fight is to win, So on either side, like, yes, fair fight, hopefully at the end of the day, but both sides essentially are trying to win. And I just mean, like, so, for example, well, I'm probably not going to make my politics very clear on things, but...
Go for it.
Take the Confederate flag issue, for example, right?
Right.
Some people will see that as getting rid of the Confederate flag, that's cancel culture. Other people will see that as to march on government property and put it on the back of your truck or everything like that. That's trying to actually cancel a culture that's trying to progress in a more equitable and gentle fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing that that's a sensitive issue for a lot of people, a lot of feelings and complexity that's there. So I think on both sides, this is why I'm like, never anybody that actually swings from one side of the pendulum to the other. I recognize that I think many people on these issues don't feel like they're the ones that are trying to oppress. They're the ones that are feeling oppressed by somebody else. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think the thing is, if you want to see which one is true,
Right.
you have to let both sides express.
Absolutely.
And we didn't have there wasn't a huge neo-Nazi problem in America, given in the last 50, 100 years, given the opportunity for everyone in America to become a white supremacist. A very, 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 very minute fraction did.
Right.
Extremely small. So they were given the chance to view the flag as how they wanted to view it, and people rejected that idea because they're like, no, I don't like that. Now the other side is saying, you don't even get the option to do that because my way is right.
Right.
And that's going to radicalize more than giving everybody the free option. That actually creates radical.
Sure. I mean, you have the ability to create radicalization in anything
Right.
that's going to be that emotionally driven. The civil rights movement, for example, I mean, you take MLK's, I mean, we read this, right, in last summer, right, his letter from Birmingham jail. I mean, that is a perfect example of art and truth and beauty, right? But how many people tried to resist that and crush that and say, this is, I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but
No, I think you're right. I
do you
think
understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? I
any
think
side
either side
can
is-
try to squash the other person.
Right.
What I'm saying is, in society, you have to let that play out because truth will effervesce to the top, and it will bring it back. So you can't. But when one side begins to say, "No, I'm going to build the walls up so that the other side is completely rejected," then you do that with language, and you do that with art, and you begin to push those things around. Solzhenitsyn has an idea of what will happen, and what you're seeing in Russia is actually one of the things that is happening. They're starting to paint beauty because of years of quote-unquote ugliness. It has to come out. So
It's like they're reinterpreting their life because beauty was squashed and hidden from them.
yes, yeah. And so if you don't give people the option to express through language, is what we're seeing now, is there's this big cancel culture for language. They're not only saying words are taboo, they're compelling speech. They're saying, no, you have to say this, and if you don't speak, well, then you're wrong. I mean, so
Catch-22.
So yeah, so think about this. So we are compelling you. You have to refer to me a certain way. It's decent for you to refer to me a certain way. And if I don't refer to you, well, then silence is violence. Right? So I compel you to speak to me a certain way, but if you refuse to speak to me or refuse to speak to me the way I want, your silence is violence and your words are violence. And then suddenly your existence is violence to me. It's an oppression to me. They've used language to create this culture that says anything that doesn't agree with what I think, and I'll change my mind tomorrow, is wrong. What I'm saying is that that's fine. You can have that opinion, but I get to have my opinion too. And they're saying, no, you don't get to have your opinion. Your opinion's wrong. Why? Well, because you exist. This is basically what they're saying. Because you exist, your opinion is wrong.
Sometimes.
No, I'm
Because
at the
even though
core
I
of it
agree
is.
with you, I think there's that other flip side, which is like, this is totally, we're taking tangents here, but of course this is like,
It's
is it
application.
just for us to be able to say, actually, we can talk to anybody the way we want. Anybody should be able to, you don't refer to me the way that I want you to refer, cancel you, but can you talk to me however you want to talk to me?
Yes,
without me.
They do that because the thing. So they get you. So here, this is the heads I win, tails you lose. Okay, this is the situation that I see play out all the time. Is someone says, no, you don't get to label me that way. You've called me something I don't like. You're a racist. Well, wait. You just labeled me something I don't like, and you try to push back, and you're like, no, sorry, that's white privilege. You go, wait. So now because I exist in the skin that I exist in, I'm wrong? So you see that? So they're compelling speech. And then if you say nothing to their plight, then that's violence. Silence is violence.
It's entrapment.
So they've created a game that no matter how I play, I lose. Well, why would I want to play the game? But the fact is, no, you can't even opt out. You have to play the game. But I lose. Yeah, that's right. You lose, but you have to play the game. What I'm saying is if you let everything be equal, we'll probably figure it out. But when you start pushing swinging that ideology one way and taking away the ability, then that's when you start to get the oppression and radicalization, which it does. It happens in the church. It happens everywhere where there's power. It happens because you want to build walls around what you think is truth. And I'm saying, no, let's open the floor because truth will out. Beauty will rise to the top. It might be ugly and messy, but it's way better than the other options.
I do agree with him. I think we're more on the same page.
I think we are, yeah.
I think this was over the Federalist Papers and Anti-Federalist Papers, this was their main concern was like this one brief moment in the late 1700s in human history when there's actually like, oh, we've released ourselves from tyranny. How do we never have it again? And so it's like the entire Federalist Papers, or I think Anti-Federalists are like this too, are how can we limit our natural urges to be greedy, control, and to become tyrants? How can we create a system of government where we just can't, where it goes as slow as it goes so that there can be no tyranny? And so that people can say what they need to say. It's just, I think they dealt with it.
Solzhenitsyn wound up in the gulag because he said something against Stalin. And as a political person, he was then thrown into jail. And he had to bring his book. He had to bring the articles with him that he wrote to his trial and read from them his trial. Going like, that's harsh. That you have to incriminate yourself in front of a tribunal and then know that where you're going because you put people there yourself, and then you've got to go, man, I'm in the gulag.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see here. See, this stuff is so good because it does bring up all this stuff. This is relevant. This was written, in the 70s. It's so relevant and so raw because it pulls at these things inside of you.
I want to make a point here because I brought this up to a friend of mine who works at Homeland Security in Washington, D.C. And he's like exceptionally well read. He read this in high school. He has it memorized. Like exceptionally read, history major, university, just really one of the smartest people I know. And then he went to Africa he left because he didn't want to be here during the election cycle. So he writes the reports that go to Congress, right? So he literally left to Africa to go do safari. He comes back. Because he's more conservative when he came back, I noticed his tone changed. He didn't know what happened. He was really angry with everything. And I'm like, whoa, this sounds like a different person. Really upset. And I said, we're reading this right here. And then he quoted something in here. And I said, the quote, it says it's like the Russian proverb. What's the Russian proverb he says in here?
Oh, yeah, the Russian proverb is... what is the Russian proverb? Something about sight and eyes.
I'm going to turn my phone off real quick.
Sight and eyes. He says something about...
Before I say this. Because he uses the DHS phone. I know that they're tracking stuff. So he says, the Russian proverb here he says is like something about looking at your neighbor with a squinted eye or something.
Yes.
Where is that? I wrote that down here.
I can't remember where it is. Believe not your own brother, believe instead your own blind eye.
Okay, so I told him that we were doing this, and he loves talking about this stuff. And he goes around the world looking for art. So he'll fly to Russia to go see paintings. He'll fly all around the world to see fine art. And then he repeated that quote. I didn't bring that up. He says, I know he says this, but he says, this is not the time for free speech. This is the time to crush alternative ideas. And I was like, it's really strange. You and I have talked about this surreal conversation because it was not his tone that he normally takes. He's like, we need to crush these fascists. And like, I said, there's something going on with my friend. I was like, this is not like him. Well, it came out that, this is why I turned my phone off. It came out that like, because he was in Africa, and he sent me pictures of all the animals, they were like, where were you during this? You must have been the bomber that set the bombs off, that planted the bombs at the DNC.
He said that to you?
No, he said that his coworkers at the
People
Homeland
were
Security
accusing him
are
of
starting to
doing it.
accuse him because he lives a very kind of beatnik life. Like he lives in his car. He travels to far off places for months, and he didn't want to tell him. He said, "I don't have to tell you where I went." He was literally had a guide from BBC, and he was camping in the Serengeti, every day sending us pictures following packs of lions. But they started to accuse him, and it came out that he was having there was this group thinking crushing in the government of we need to rat out any other speech other than this speech. This narrative is the only narrative we're going to allow in the federal government. And so he was being put under pressure trying to defend himself. And all his friends are saying, people, the Homeland Security is saying, dishonorable people are saying, this man is unsafe. He's conservative. He should be fired. He should be put in jail. And this is what he actually writes these reports. But it's just interesting that he reported that he knew that line and turned it around. And I recognized that what was going on was he was using a DHS phone. And so he was trying to say the things that they were wanting him to hear on the phone. Because he was using Homeland Security phone. So I was like, this does not sound like my friend at all. I was like, this sounds scary what you're trying to tell me. But he was trying to say what they wanted him to hear so that he wouldn't be incriminated. That's not really, I don't think, what he believes. Does that make sense what I just said?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is kind of a weird moment in history right now. It's just
There's some other stuff in the book that talks about that.
yeah.
We'll get to this, and then we'll probably have to stop, but this is going to be so good. So perhaps the old trinity of truth and good and beauty is not just the formal, outworn formula used to seem to us during our heady, materialistic youth. If the crest of these three trees join together as the investigators and explorers use to affirm, and if it is too obvious and too straight, branches of truth and good are crushed or amputated and cannot reach the light, yet perhaps the whimsical, unpredictable, unexpected branches of beauty will make their way through and soar up to that very place, in this way perform the work of all three trees. And in that case, it was not a slip of the tongue for Dostoyevsky to say, beauty will save the world, but a prophecy. After all, he was given the gift of seeing much, and he was extraordinarily illuminated. And consequently, perhaps art, literature can in fact help the world today. The little which I have managed to discern over the years, I shall try to set forth here today. And if the too obvious and too straight branches of truth and good are crushed or amputated and cannot reach the light, yet perhaps the whimsical, unpredictable, unexpected branches of beauty will make their way through and soar up to that place, and in this way perform the work of all three.
It's interesting. It's I think about what does it mean for, I think we're in a time period now where it's there's a marring of goodness and there's a casting off of what we thought was good, and people are no, that is not good, this is good. So there's a crushing of you don't know what, goodness is shaking. You don't know what's good. There's a crushing of it. That's
It almost seems like he's saying that truth can be manipulated. Language of truth can be manipulated in a sense, you can hide it.
Yeah.
Good, you can masquerade as good.
You can try to redefine it.
But it's almost like he's saying, but you can't fake beauty. Right? It's unpredictable, it's whimsical, it's not formulaic. Truth and good are formulaic. There's discipline, there's precepts, there's behavioral things that you do. If you're good, you act a certain way. If you speak the truth, there's only certain things that are true. Beauty is unconscious and it's beyond formula that you can't crush it because it's whimsical, it's unpredicted, it's unexpected, and so it zigs when you zag, and you can't harness beauty because it's wild and it's expressive and even if they crush, so he's saying even if they crush truth with language and they create doublespeak and they create a society that crushes truth, and they crush good and they amputate good, we're okay because beauty still exists, because beauty will still rise and it will perform the work of all three. When someone sees the beautiful it will move in them truth. And seeing beauty will actually move in them to good. Like seeing great beauty could cause people to actually change and have good behavior, and become good. And you see something magnificent and go, I've seen this, I'm forever changed, and have a transformative experience just by seeing beauty. And it can actually overcome any lack that we have of truth or good in our environment.
It reminded me a lot of Paul's faith, hope, and love. That there is, faith, hope, and but love is the greatest of all of these. And that you can be all of these things. You can have as much faith in the world, you can have practice as much good as you can, but if you don't have love, then those prior to, you're just really unfulfilled.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That the love is synonymous here with beauty, and this is absolutely Christian theology.
Well, I think love, because love forgives when it shouldn't. And it's unpredictable in that sense, right?
Well, the first attack that you see in Scripture is an attack on love. It wasn't just an attack on truth. When Satan comes to Eve, he's actually attacking God's motives as being unloving. Because
you can't trust him.
Yeah, if you feel like a paternal figure doesn't love you, then you don't trust them, and then he actually is a competitor to you.
He's not who he says he is.
He didn't give you this because he loves you. He gave you this because he told you not to eat this because he thought that you would overdo him, or it's an attack on love, like actual love. And
I think totally gives new meaning as well to like the book of God is Scripture, but also the book of God is nature, right? And as you see nature, you see beauty, and you should be able to see God through that beauty, through looking at the landscape, or looking through the mountains, or looking at the sunset, or whatever. That it's not just the recognition of, I was watching this the other day. Of course, we landed this new thing on Mars, right? And so everybody's crazy excited about the fact that we got a new rover up on Mars, and it's got color pictures and a video camera and everything like that. But what are the things that I saw? Like sunset from Mars. It wasn't about we're excited about this being able to, or geological stuff. It was let's look at the sunset from Mars.
Beauty.
And see that beauty.
Now, did you guys ever watch that movie Contact from the Carl Sagan book? The best part of the movie is when she's a scientist. You guys have you ever seen that movie before? Jodie Foster.
It's good.
She does it. She goes. You remember? She gets out to this alternate galaxy, taken out there by this alien, and she's the scientist. And when she gets out there, she sees the beauty and she starts crying, and she says they should have sent an artist or a poet, or not me. They shouldn't have sent a scientist. And it was so beautiful. It was
yeah,
the best part of the movie. Best part of the movie.
When she unstraps herself.
Oh, it's just so much. It's
the design didn't include
for
that.
Carl Sagan, there's so many issues of faith and beauty that he can't get past.
You can't.
He just can't get past, even though he's this atheist, right?
So those things I think are accidental in movies when people are trying to squash them out and they can't get away from that archetype. It keeps popping up, and it's the most important part of the movie. Is that
it's the most important part?
And people will resonate with that, and they see it, and they're like, this is. People who have survived concentration camps will have those moments where Corrie ten Boom is standing in line naked for 6 hours. God brings a skylark to sing to her,
and all of the prisoners,
and it pulls them out of the beauty of the song. Pulls them out of the terror.
It's like Shawshank Redemption. That scene with the
yes.
two opera singers. He puts
yeah,
it's awesome scene.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
I can't watch that movie too much. It's too hard.
So we got through a chapter. Are you guys enjoying this?
Yes.
Okay.
I got to say, when I see this written a lot about truth, beauty, and goodness, but it's like kind of like if you're working in a factory, the Toyota factory, sometimes you don't get to actually. A lot of friends work at the Toyota factory in Georgetown. They don't necessarily get to enjoy all the cars that are produced from the factory. Sometimes because I feel like I work in the factory of beauty, like I don't always see the outcome of this, but I see what people say. Like I've had talks with a lot of people who are atheists, who are my collectors, who say things like this. They're like, I start talking, but they call me up and like, they had this transcendent experience, and like they are with me all the way until the point where I say the name Jesus. So like everything you said about this beauty and experience in God, I am with you. I just can't say the name Jesus. They go all the way, because you're atheists, they go all the way up just by looking at paintings.
The same thing happened with the Josh Garrels. When he made The Sea in Between, that video series. This family invited him and the band to come up to Maine, Canada. Yeah. These islands. And they're like, we're not religious people, but they loved his music. And they're like, we want to create an atmosphere for you to be able to create more here. They didn't know, and it's not like he's a hidden Christian artist, like he's hiding stuff in his words. It's very obvious, and yet they were moved by it.
That's
truth. Moved by truth.
So art gets past the watchful dragons, which is why Lewis writes fairy tales, because it helps him skate around the watchful dragons and then deliver truth. And so your painting is bringing them truth. And it's not until you mention the word of Jesus that the watchful dragon is like, oh, wait, guys, no, this is bad. Let me incinerate that.
That's exactly what happens.
Part of what Tolkien made into the argument on fairy stories as well, was that it was a vehicle for getting around things and conveying truth about our world.
Yeah, and it is. And we have tons of examples of what's being said here about beauty transforming us that we're like, what this happens in movies. It happens when movies are made by atheists and they can't get away from it. It effervesces to the top. And so when something like that effervesces to the top, hold on to it. Because those experiences that move you, hold on to those, because there's something true and deep about those. And that's those kind of things are what gets people through concentration camps. And it gets them through that. And it gets you to go, beauty, they may cut off the ability for you to speak truth. They may cut off the ability for you to be good, but they cannot stop beauty. And so hold on to that. And I think that's just so powerful in today, and knowing this guy's seen it. Corey ten Boom's lived it. Viktor Frankl's lived. These guys have lived it. And
I'm just thinking about him and the butterfly.
What thing?
Yes, Frankel and the butterflies.
Yeah, he was out one day and being ordered around and all that, and all of a sudden he saw this butterfly and just saw the beauty in it, even in the crap that he was going through. And it just touched his heart in a very deep and meaningful way.
Yeah.
And that's how he was able to get through that experience, is to find the full beauties in the simplest things.
Have you guys ever seen Last Samurai?
Yes. That's a beautiful movie too.
Love Last Samurai. Ken Watanabe actually says his character, I forget what his character in the movie's name is, but he's the head of the village. And he comes out to the lotus bush, and he says, you could spend your entire life looking for the perfect lotus blossom, and when you see it, it would not have been a life wasted. You go, oh, wow. Because beauty would just come in, and that experiential moment of beauty has more truth than an entire life of philosophy would have in it. And it's just so, and you guys know how much I love philosophy, but this is just so impactful from people who have, this is earned wisdom right here, and it's just so heavy. And again, you don't have to believe all of it. You don't have to hold on to all of it, but there's things in here that are nourishment and sustaining, and that will help you flourish. And that's what's not being offered today. Like Randy was saying, if some people, if you don't read, I don't trust you. Because I don't know, your philosophy probably hasn't been tested. Hey, here's this new philosophy I have. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna put these. Here are my beliefs. And you're like, have this been tested? No, but it'll work. No, I mean, give me Ulysses. Give me Aristotle. Give me Frankel's and Solzhenitsyn. Guys who have this has worked for them. This is tested methods of flourishing. What do I anchor myself to in these times? You know, what truths do I say? No, I'm going to hold to this. And they're like, you can't believe that. Well, I'm going to anchor down and I'm going to hold on to this because I know in the end, truth will out, beauty will prevail, and so
That's how we do Save the World, is because it offers the sustainment. The point is hang on to,
yes.
no matter what's going on around you.
Say that again.
And the beauty, it offers that point of sustainment. That one thing that you can grab, no matter what the rest of the world may look like around you, you grab onto that bit of beauty, and it can sustain you through that until it is better.
Wow.
I think this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up.
Don't shut up.
But I think, in my heart, is obviously very cultural, right? And I see a lot of people that say I don't read, and it's not because they just don't have any desire to. Sometimes that's the case, but a lot of it is because I don't have time to read, right? And so a lot of people just go through life about the only thing that I have time to consume is something that's going to be having utility for now. And the danger with that is that you live an entire life in utility, but eventually when the bigger questions meet you when your spouse dies, when you have a child that doesn't, when you question your faith, whatever, eventually the big questions of meaning are going to hit. And if you don't have any baggage, of literature and art and beauty and all of that with you, then you don't have anything to turn to other than utility tools which aren't going to get you anywhere. And that's why, and I think it's like, as a father, like that's why I push my kids so hard to read, because I'm like, you got to have this in your background,
Yeah.
That's good.
Mario Brothers isn't going to help you.
This is why I don't have video games in my house.
A little bit, but
Because they're so addictive.
So there's.
That's why I don't play them anymore, because I'm awesome at them.
Me too.
Tiger King's
I'm very good.
That's right. Tiger King's not going to
That's why I
help
don't
you.
play them.
So Tiger King's not going to help you. Honey Boo Boo's not coming to the rescue.
That's right.
That's what my parents do with each other in bed.
So there's this.
It exercises your brain.
some of the
They-
No
ways,
wisdom,
like,
beauty, or truth
that's
is
part of
not.
our
They,
job
they
to do, is not
compete
for
with
us
one
to
another in the
sit
same
there
books. They do it
and
because
rest.
it's
So
cute.
I'm
Yes.
becoming more and more convinced that Christianity can almost be synonymous with resistance.
Yes.
And then so much of our job is to resist the push of a culture that says you don't have time to take in beauty because we have so much for you to do. You only have time to take in stuff that's going to contribute towards a utility-driven culture. And so that's why I think like Sabbath and stuff
Yes,
like that
I
are
was just
so
thinking
important for us to maintain the culture.
That's great. I was just listening to a really great podcast. You guys know Jonathan David Helser, and Melissa. They're the ones who.
Oh yeah, I listen to podcasts.
Did you listen to the most recent one? What was it on like?
I listened to their one on Sabbath.
It was kind of like that. It was on like ministry burnout. I was just so moved by that because it's like exactly the message I needed to hear. It says like burnout happens when our doing exceeds our being. And he talks
that's
about,
good.
He goes back to Genesis and he says it's like, after all God's work was done, he like crowned Adam and Eve and told them to be fruitful and multiply. And then the very next day, he's like, they're ready to get going and to start subduing the earth and expanding the garden. And he says, and he puts it this way, he says, and then he gets up early and makes Adam and Eve coffee and pancakes and says, no, we're going to rest today. This is about relationship.
Yes.
Remember that part?
Mhm,
It was just like so beautiful.
About that earlier.
so beautiful. I just been listening to that podcast over and over. It's really great. That one in particular is just really great.
I think that's good. I'm going to end here with one of my favorite examples that I've heard. It's stuck with me so much. It's very impactful. I think I read it in Reader's Digest back when my family used to get those all the time. But this professor comes into a class, and he has an empty jar. It's a very big empty jar. And he asks the class, "Is the jar full?" The class doesn't know what to say at the beginning. And he's like, "No, it's not. It's not full. It's empty." And they're like, "Okay." And so he takes a bunch of big rocks and he puts into the jar and he fills it to the top. And he goes, "Is the jar full?" And some of the kids are getting like, "No, it's not full." He's like, "You're right, it's not full." So he takes smaller rocks and fills into the cracks. And he goes, "Is the jar full?" And everybody's getting onto it now. "No, the jar's not full." And so he gets pea gravel and pours down in there and fills it to the top of the pea gravel. "Is the jar full?" And everybody's in unison, "No, it's not full." So he gets sand. And he pours sand down in there. "Is the jar full?" "No." And he pours water in there and goes all the way to the top. And he goes, "Is the jar full?" And somebody says, "No." He's like, "Yes, now the jar is full." What's the moral? And somebody says, "You can always find room for a little bit more." And he says, "No, if you don't get the big rocks in first, you may not get them in at all." That's why this stuff is important. If you don't get the big rocks in, if you don't wrestle with this stuff, if you don't wrestle with the questions, if you don't get the Solzhenitsyn, if you don't get the Jesus Christ, if you don't get the big things in first, it is so much harder in life to get those things in because you're set in your ways. Now, we have a secret weapon called the Holy Spirit that can rewire and re-navigate an entire, recalculate an entire existence. But for a lot of us, even if we have that, we fall back into routines, and if the foundations aren't there, we have an existence that is weak and shaky, and it's so hard to get the big rocks in. And that's why we do this. This is why we wrestle. This is why we bring our heresies in, or we bring all of our junk in here, and we go, how did Solzhenitsyn wrestle this out? Can we learn something from this? I don't know if he's right or not. I think he's got some good stuff to say. What did he say? How did he live his life? What was the outcome of his life? Yeah, he's got something to say. Let's wrestle it. Can I pull something from that and put it into my life? Because I need it. So that's all we have for tonight. We will be back next Monday and talk some more Solzhenitsyn. Further up.
Further in.